The Messianic movement has a love-hate relationship with the oral tradition of the Jewish people. You see, the Messianic movement holds true to the core tenets of Christianity. However, they appropriate Jewish customs, traditions, icons in order to put a more Jewish face in Christianity. Let me give you some specific examples of this. Over in Leviticus chapter 23, we're told that there's supposed to be one day per year in which there's a remembrance of blowing. What does that mean? What are you supposed to blow? Maybe you're supposed to blow your nose, or perhaps it was those silver trumpets that we had inside of the desert. How do you know from the written text? The Jewish people have an oral tradition that the blowing that we're supposed to do on that day is with a ram's horn, a shofar. Now, if you walk into any Messianic congregation in Rosh Hashanah, you're going to see that they're blowing a ram's horn. Here's another example. We're told that we're supposed to make twisted fringes on the corner of our garments. And many Messianic men will be seen wearing these twisted fringes, these tzitzis. But the question is why are the women inside of the movement not wearing these? And how do these people know how to tie their fringes? How do you know how many knots they're supposed to have? One must look to the oral tradition of the Jewish people to know how many knots to make, and also to know that women are not obligated in time-bound mitzvahs, in time-bound commandments. In many Messianic congregations, you'll also find people making blessings, either before they read the Torah, before they light Shabbat candles, before they eat food. Eat food, that's a really interesting one. Let's talk about this. Blessings are completely rabbinic in nature, especially the blessing before we eat food. We do find a biblical injunction that we're supposed to make a blessing after we eat. In Deuteronomy chapter 8, verse 10, it tells us that after we eat and we're sated, we should bless God. And yet many Messianics are not blessing God after they eat, but they are blessing them beforehand. Why? Because it's a Jewish custom that they can use to their advantage. Here's another one, and this one is massive. Every Messianic congregation lights Shabbat candles, and every Messianic congregation can be seen with men wearing kippahs with yarmulkes covering their head. Why do they do this? This is 100% oral tradition, rabbinic tradition of the Jewish people. You see, this is a scam. This is a way to woo heritage-proud Jews to the cross. The majority of the Messianic movement hates the rabbinic oral tradition, and those who speak favorably of it only cherry-pick the teachings that suit their agendas. Anything that speaks negatively of Jesus would be completely rejected. Anything that speaks negatively of the core tenets of Christianity, such as vicarious atonement or incarnation, those are completely rejected. The Jewish traditions that are used in Messianic congregations are only to make it feel more Jewish to unsuspecting Jews. If you speak to a Messianic leader, you're not going to be told this. You're going to be told something completely different. And the truth is that many of these leaders are not even Jewish themselves. And in fact, I grew up with one of these guys who was completely non-Jewish and now calls himself a rabbi. What they're going to tell you is that they're just trying to live like first century Jews because Jesus was a Jew. Now, I want to speak about this. Let's go into this a little bit more in depth. We have absolutely no clue if Jesus ever existed, and if he existed, what he believed in, what he actually did. He may have been an Orthodox Jew, and he may have even had a fledgling cult. It makes sense that people would have attached themselves to him if he was a charismatic personality, and they had some kind of hope that they placed in him. You see, the first century was a very difficult time for the Jewish people. The Romans are all over the place. There was a lot of oppression, a lot of persecution. It was very, very painful for the Jewish people, and people desperately needed a Messiah. So it makes sense that a movement could have been started. However, we have absolutely no contemporaneous writings from that time that mention Jesus. Philo, the lead historian of the era, didn't write a single word about him. Likewise, Josephus, who lived a short time after him, didn't write a single word about him. Now, yes, I know there are people who are going to say Antiquities. All scholars across the board agree that the piece in Antiquities was a later interpolation, and we can even trace it back to the likely time slot in which this piece was inserted. That's a different story. The point is that if Jesus was so well known and he was performing such wondrous miracles everywhere he went, why don't we have any historical record of that? Why did nobody mention it? The earliest works that mention Jesus are Christian writings, are the works of Paul. Beyond that, history is silent on the matter of Jesus. Let's take this a step further. If it is true that Jesus was a Pharisee, if it is true that Jesus existed, and if it is true that the first century Christians believed he was the Messiah, it still doesn't comport with the core tenets of the Messianic movement that exists today. You see, first century Jews would have had an absolutely visceral reaction to the core tenets of Christianity as they are upheld today in Messianic movements. The idea of vicarious atonement, that an innocent being can die on your behalf, was completely absent from the Jewish mindset. It came from the Greco-Roman world and the broader pagan world in which babies and virgins died for the sake of whoever was sacrificing them. It was a way for pagans to curry favor with their gods. Likewise, Augustine, who hailed from the pagan world himself, developed the doctrine of original sin. This would have been completely disgusting to the Jewish mind. No first century Jew would have believed in such an odious doctrine. And then you have the Trinity. The Trinity was a stage-by-stage development, and Tertullian was the first one to use the word Trinity, but even his belief was rejected as not being orthodox. And the Trinity doctrine that you have today was only developed between 325 CE and 381 CE at the Councils of Nicaea and the Council of Constantinople, when they literally voted into being the doctrine of the Trinity as you have it today. And then you had the whole demigod thing, the belief that there was a man god that came straight from the pagan world. No Jew would have accepted this belief. The core tenets of modern-day Christianity literally developed over time. Some of the earliest Christians didn't even agree on who Jesus was. The Ebionites, for instance, believed that he was a mortal man and the Messiah, and that he was not God. The Marcionites, on the other hand, believed that he was completely God, he was not a man, and he was just an apparition. Christianity was literally a pick-and-choose religion in which things were incorporated from both Judaism and from the pagan world, from all different sorts of mystery religions, and it developed over time. We would be absolutely foolish to listen to the Messianic claim that they're just trying to live like first-century Jews, because first-century Jews reject all of the core tenets of Christianity. So here's the deal. If you're inside of a Messianic congregation and you find things that you love, if you see a tallis, if you see a kippah, if you see the reading of the Torah, if you see all of these different things, those are rooted in Judaism, in rabbinic tradition. The Shabbat candles, the blessing, all of it, the shofar, it comes from rabbinic Judaism, it comes from the oral law. It doesn't come from Christianity. I'm going to say it again. All of these things were appropriated from Judaism in order to slap a more Jewish face on Christianity, but the core tenets remain the same. The Messianic movement is Christianity in drag. You can't have your cake and eat it too. If you see value and if you see beauty inside of the Jewish traditions, then it's time to go back to where it came from. You can't have the Greco-Roman traditions of believing in a man god, believing that something can die for your sins. No, you have to go back to the Torah. You have to go back to the people who have the Torah and who know the Torah and have the understanding of what the Torah actually means. You have to go back to the people who God trusted to relay his word to the world. It's not the Messianic movement.